Hello, and thank you so much for being with us today. My name is Ben Lack, and I'm on the marketing team here at cPrime, as well as your moderator for today. And today's topic is 5 leading challenges facing PMOs and how Agile program management is changing the game. So we've got a nice slate of presenters who are going to be sharing some of their wisdom with you today. We've got Brian Mulconrey, who is the founder of Tomorrow's Enterprise Corporation. I'm going to give you his quick bio. He's advised Fortune 500 manufacturers, nonprofits, and customer experience and AI tech startups. He's worked extensively in the insurance industry and has a number of certifications, including his Six Sigma Black Belt certification, and as well as certifications for project management professional, Agile certified practitioner, certified Scrum professional, certified Scrum master, and certified Scrum product owner designations. He also holds the SAFe program consultant certification by Scaled Agile. Rebecca Dobbin is calling in from Austin, Texas today, and Rebecca is the product analyst at Tasktop. Before joining the Tasktop team, she worked as a project manager for years, helping nonprofit clients manage their fundraising programs. She believes that information should be easily accessible and that data integration tools should be easy to use. When she isn't writing user guides for Tasktop, she enjoys camping and listening to podcasts. So those are our presenters for today. I want to go over a couple of quick housekeeping items just so that everyone's on the same page. First, if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, please feel free to ask them in the chat box, and we'll be sure to either ask them while the presenters are doing their thing or after the presentations, or we may even just do it in the general Q&A after both presentations have been made. We are recording today's session, and we are going to deliver that as well as today's slides to you so that you can review or share with any of your colleagues. And then finally, if you don't mind, we'd love for you to fill out just a quick 3-question survey. That will help us get a sense for how useful this content was to you and get any other ideas for topics that we may be able to produce for you for future webinars. So Brian, if you could quickly advance the slide. For those that don't know who cPrime is, we're one of the largest Agile and DevOps consulting, staffing, and training companies in the country. We help people with people, process, and technology. So on the consulting side, really helping you better understand your process and coming up with solutions for that. We're one of the largest resellers of Atlassian software tools, and we are based in Foster City, California, which is part of the Bay Area. We'd love to have this session be really engaging for you. So I want to get started by launching just a quick poll question, and this should be popping up on your box right now. The question is, how many Scrum teams does your organization have? So if you can quickly just select either 0, 1 to 2, 3 to 5, 6 to 10, or more than 10. This gives us some good insight, and I'm going to ask Brian to just kind of give me his thoughts on, whether he's seeing the same thing with clients that he's working with, and this will help us tailor both presentations to our audience. So give everybody another 5 seconds, and then we'll share results and let Brian begin his presentation. Okay, so looks like almost a third of the people have more than 10 Scrum teams, which is great. In second place, a quarter of you are just getting started, got one to two Scrum teams, and then there are a couple of folks that don't have Scrum teams, so this is probably some good intro education for you guys. But Brian, curious to hear your thoughts around what you're seeing from this poll.
Oh, this looks great. For those that have more than, with about, let's see, 2/3 basically have 3 or more Scrum teams, and so that's exactly the kind of content that I think this is the program management is exactly the types of challenges that organizations that are beginning to scale Scrum are going to be running into. So this is terrific.
Great. Well, thanks everybody for sharing your answers. We'll have a couple more polls. We'll have one more poll question later. But without further ado, I would like to pass it off to Brian so that he can begin his presentation.
Well, thank you, Ben. I appreciate it. So let's take a look. I guess I want to ask all of you, tell me how many of you recognize some of these challenges? We're constantly changing scope. We're writing change requests. Our senior executives are continually announcing impossible deadlines. Nobody seems to feel accountable for these impossible deadlines, and poor communications are resulting in a lot of surprises where we're running into these surprises often late in the development cycle. And we aren't very good at managing the real risks that are threatening some of our programs. From a number of sources, we kind of put these together. These and some variations on these themes are, I think, generally considered some of the biggest challenges that are facing PMOs today. And I guess what we want to talk about here is some of the key ways that Agile program management helps to address these challenges. And given the number of Scrum teams that you're currently, that many of those on the call are currently supporting within your organization, I think you'll recognize some of these forces. So let's take a look at what we mean by Agile program management. So basically what we're looking at with Agile program management is this center area here with where we have a collection of teams. In this example, we're looking at a program that has 6 Agile teams, but this is just representative. We could have programs that require 10 teams. We're not going to go into programs here that might require the scaling up to 30 teams, for example, but that is certainly a topic that we can we'll be going over in future webinars. But looking at this program here with 6 teams, let's use this as kind of our typical example as we go through looking at these 5 challenges. So let's take a look at number 1. And essentially this challenge is the challenge of constant scope changes. And essentially what we're proposing here is that we need to learn to love scope changes. And why do we want to love scope changes? Well, here's a little excerpt from the Agile Manifesto. Our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. In effect, our highest priority is that we have to be constantly changing scope in response to customer priorities. And that's kind of a different way of looking at scope changes, but let's take a look at what makes that possible within Agile program management. And most of you are familiar with this graphic if you're working with multiple Scrum teams. Essentially, it's the empowered program level and team level product owners that make scope changes not only possible within an Agile program management framework, but essential. We need to be constantly examining the product backlog to determine what are the current highest priority stories that our teams need to be focused on. So this is the key basically the key answer to that question of how do we learn to love scope change within Agile program management. And we'll talk a little bit later about the program level product owner, but essentially it's the process of looking at the program backlog and applying the same discipline that we apply to the team level product backlog. And the counter to this, or the current framework that a lot of organizations are coming from, is viewing change as disruptive and having change control processes that may make it difficult to invite change into the process. So let's look at our second challenge. Senior managers, senior executives going out announcing impossible deadlines. If you're like me, looking at project management over the past number of years, you're familiar with the concept of the iron triangle. And the concept here is that quality, the three constraints of the iron triangle, quality, time, and cost, we can't change one without, or essentially something has to give. If we're going to fix time, we may have to compromise on cost or quality. And if we're going to fix cost, we may have to compromise on time or quality, etc. The thing that the iron triangle misses, though, misses really the most important element, which is what we look at when we look at the Agile triangle, which is scope. Essentially, the way that we transform this problem into an opportunity in Agile is by controlling the scope of what we're going to deliver as the key strategy for managing limited time and limited resources. And you know, it used to be that we thought of that as a negative, that we were sacrificing something by controlling scope. But for those on the call, and I guess most of you or many of you are familiar with the Lean Startup book. The Lean Startup came out about 10 years ago and introduced or popularized the concept of the minimum viable product. The idea that what we need to be doing with Agile is getting our initial product, our initial scope out there quickly as a minimum viable product, and then essentially iterating quickly. The fact that we have only 2-week, 1-week sprint cycles means that we can introduce these additional features. We can introduce scope that may not have made it in the initial deliverable quickly. But if we're going through a feedback cycle of putting out a minimum product and then looking to that feedback to direct what scope we're going to focus on next, we're delivering better quality, more customer responsive software. So let's take a look now at number 3, problem number 3, where nobody seems to feel accountable. And how does Agile program management address the challenge of lack of accountability? Well, the key thing, or the key events we're going to talk about here in a minute, the sprint planning, but the first event to talk about is program release planning. And this can be anywhere from every 10 weeks to every 3 months, where we bring our Agile teams together to plan and estimate together. And they don't just plan and estimate, they also make commitments to each other and make commitments to the program management that's leading these planning meetings. We bring together the program leadership at these meetings so that we can resolve conflicts rapidly. And we basically provide an opportunity to engage all of the developers in the process of estimating, planning, and identifying dependencies and risks for an overall program increment. And we'll talk a little more about the definition of a program increment in a few minutes. But the other major layer of commitment when we talk about Agile program management is that these iteration planning meetings that we talked about a minute ago, release planning, they do not essentially define an immovable scope every 10 weeks. What they're doing is they're defining a target scope, a target increment that we're going after, with the idea that as we go through the individual sprints, assuming we're on a 2-week cycle here, the team is basically, with the product owner prioritization, is committing to work each sprint. So when we start talking about accountability and commitment, Agile program management is essentially structured to continually reinforce commitments, continually reinforce accountability. So let's look at number 4, the challenge of poor communication. This is one of those challenges that it's when you don't have communication, when you have good communication, almost any other problem is solvable. When you don't have good communication, a lot of things become difficult. And so let's talk for a minute about the communication pillars within Agile program management framework. The first one we just talked about, release planning, several teams planning together to reach program milestones. The second item here is the Scrum of Scrums meetings. And this is where, if you have the example that we gave a little bit earlier of 6 teams, you would have your 6 Scrum Masters, and then in a separate Scrum of Scrum meeting, your 6 product owners meeting periodically in order to share information on dependencies, share information on challenges they might be running into. Essentially, a fair bit of pretty intense coordination that goes on with these Scrum of Scrum meetings. Frequently, there's more than one per week. User story ultimately is designed to be a reason to have a conversation with your team. And of course, the sprint planning meeting. What are we going to do in this sprint? For those on the call, and because we have so many folks that are already working with multiple Scrum teams, I won't belabor the value of the communication that we get from the daily stand-up, but it's a key communication strategy in Agile program management. And then, of course, we have the sprint review where we communicate with stakeholders every sprint, and the retrospective where we communicate within the team on how things are going within that team. Again, when we start talking about communication, an organization that's having challenges with communication on their programs, looking at a team of Agile teams is a very powerful strategy. And going to the last of the 5 major challenges, the Rome formula for engaging Agile teams in risk management. There's nothing unique about Rome by itself. We all have used some form of this. We either resolve a challenge, resolve a risk, we own the risk. Someone owns the risk from a follow-up standpoint, or we accept the risk. There's some risks that there's not a lot we can do to mitigate them or to resolve them. We just have to accept the fact that that risk is going to be there and do our best if we run into it. And then mitigation. But the key that we're dealing with Agile program management is that we're leveraging the wisdom of all of our teams. By planning together, you're not just depending on a few senior program executives to identify the risks associated with the program. You're basically engaging the wisdom of all of your teams, and that's really the difference with risk management in an agile program management environment. So let's take a few minutes and just talk about some of the possibilities for next steps in terms of if you perhaps have a few agile teams currently that are working within niches within your organization, but you have not done anything yet to really scale agile in terms of doing agile program management. There's a few steps that you can consider in terms of a starting point. The first, if you haven't already done it, is to create a program level backlog. In other words, take that program, look at the product, the agile teams that you have delivering for that program, and essentially begin to develop and put in place the epics that form the program backlog. Once you have that in place and you are ready to take the next step in terms of agile program management, you'll want to identify a program management framework, and I'm using SAFe here as an example, the Scaled Agile Framework. I'm a big advocate of SAFe. I've used it extensively, do a lot of SAFe training, and feel that it is a very strong candidate framework if you're, particularly as you are moving from maybe you have 4 or 5 teams and you're looking at the possibility of moving to 10, 20 teams, 50 teams that might be part of your program or programs that you're going to be supporting with Agile program management. It's a very strong framework. It's beyond the scope of this call, but it's something to consider. And then you'll want to spend some time identifying program level roles and responsibilities. And some of that will depend on the framework that you select, but some of the key roles are the ones that we talked about a little bit earlier, of having a program level product owner. There's also a program level Scrum Master that can role that can coordinate and facilitate communication among the individual Scrum Masters supporting individual teams. And then set a date for an Agile program release planning meeting. The key is getting started, and the key to getting started oftentimes is to set milestones. And so to recap, Agile program management, transforming 5 challenges into 5 opportunities. I just want to kind of wrap up by recapping the 5 major strategies that we just went over: learning to love scope changes, meeting impossible dates by prioritizing scope using the Agile triangle instead of the iron triangle. Basically looking at the extent to which Agile teams really address a lot of the accountability problems that we've seen with more waterfall-oriented approaches to development. And then the fact that Agile teams communicate continuously, and we can address a number of the communication challenges. I was just on a project last week with a group of teams, and they might have had a few challenges here and there, but what was really encouraging was that to a team, they all cited great communication as one of the things that was going well with working in Agile. And then, of course, the Rome formula for engaging all of your Agile teams in the risk management process. So that's basically the end of my formal presentation, but I'd like to definitely look forward to answering specific questions. I will turn the presentation over to Ben.
Great, thank you so much. Brian, I've got two very quick questions for you, and then I'm going to pass it off to Rebecca. Raj has asked what is the Rome formula, so could you just maybe take 30 seconds and explain what that is?
Sure, I apologize. So the basic formula, if we go back to that slide, is it's an acronym for, and I should have probably bolded the first letters of each of these. So ROAM is just a little acronym to remember resolved, owned, accepted, and mitigated. And so by taking the first letter of each, we're able to use that little mental reminder to help us keep in mind the idea that when it comes to risk management, you want to make sure that you either resolve the risk, you make sure somebody is responsible for following up on it, you accept the risk, or you come up with some kind of a mitigation approach. And the key with Agile program management is the fact that you're doing that with all of your teams, not just a few program executives.
Terrific. And one more quick clarification question. Ken says that in relation to the iron triangle, isn't that traditionally scope, time, cost, with quality typically not represented unless triangle is elevated to a tetrahedron?
Yeah, you know, I've seen it done in both. I probably selected the other one only because I think the sort of the older version of it had quality in there, and I think one of the things that it did was it really ignored the fact to a large degree that you could use scope to control the flow of value. So you're right. I have seen it represented both ways, and I think you know, it's. I guess I just selected the quality triangle to illustrate the point of not forgetting about the fact that scope is a variable. Scope is something we can control, whereas the quality, time, cost triangle ignores the fact that we can change scope.
Great, thanks for that. I think that solved it. Thank you.
Okay.
So we're gonna switch more from a process conversation to a tools conversation. So as we allow Rebecca to share her screen, I want to post another poll right now. And so approximately how many software development tools are used within your organization? If you can select one of the following, either 0, 1 to 3, 4 to 6, 7 to 10, and then more to 10, that'd be great. In the meantime, there were some folks that asked some additional questions, Brian, about your presentation. And so for those people, we're going to ask those in the general Q&A so we can have Rebecca begin and kind of talk about this tool answer as well. So give everybody just a couple more seconds to chime in, and then we'll share results and discuss real quick. Okay, so it looks like 35% of the group has anywhere from 4 to 6 tools, roughly 40%, a little more than 40% have more than 7. So quite a decent sized tech stack, Rebecca. I'm kind of interested in your thoughts on what you see there.
Yeah, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay, great. My GoToMeeting quit unexpectedly right during the poll, so I actually did not have a chance to see the results. Would you be able to recap them for me?
Absolutely.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, so I think that those results look pretty typical. I'm seeing a lot of people having more than 10 tools at their organizations, which is something that I've definitely experienced and seen to be pretty common. So in my presentation, we'll talk a little bit more about ways that we can enhance communication between those tools and make your job as a project manager a little bit easier. So I'm glad to see that your experiences look to be consistent with what I've seen across the board.
Terrific.
Perfect. Are
So,
you all able to see my PowerPoint presentation or no?
not yet.
Okay. I think, Ben, so it looks like there are two of me in the GoToMeeting right now. Is it possible to pass presentation
Oh, yeah.
duties to, yeah,
Yeah.
there we
Fine.
go. Hopefully it won't crash again when I set this up. Everything look
Yep.
good on your end? Okay, perfect. All right, so thank you everyone for joining today. As you know, my name's Rebecca Dobbin and I'm a product analyst at Tasktop. And today I'm going to be taking some of the ideas that Brian presented earlier about how Agile program management can transform your PMO challenges and turn them into opportunities. And I'll be showing you one crucial missing component that can help take your project management to the next level. And that missing ingredient is value stream integration. So if you don't know what that is, don't worry. We'll be walking through it in detail as we move through the presentation. So first I want to share a little bit more about myself. So as Ben mentioned earlier, I have a history working as a project manager with nonprofit clients. And in my role as a project manager, we actually did not utilize Agile program management. So as Brian had mentioned, the approach that we used was much more traditional, much more heavyweight, and definitely led to a lot of disruption for customers and a lot of delays as we would need to spend time rescoping, sending customers new contracts, and having these bottlenecks as we waited for approvals. So I can definitely echo that Agile program management can really help eliminate those bottlenecks and improve delivery. So one of the biggest obstacles that I feel like I faced as a project manager was figuring out how to navigate these communication barriers that I experienced between teams. So as a project manager, you really have to straddle several different worlds as you work with contributors in different departments to deliver quality to your customers. So in my role, I would work with developers, business analysts, QA teams, and more. And what I found, which seems consistent with your polling result, is that each team used a totally different tool. So I would need to gain access to that tool. I would need to learn how to use it. I would need to learn each team's practices and policies in order to learn how to successfully communicate with them. So these team silos and communication barriers had a really huge impact on my efficacy as a project manager and ultimately on the happiness of our customers. So we're going to talk through these challenges a bit more in the presentation, as well as some possible solutions. But first I want to talk a bit more about my current role at Tasktop. So I'm currently working as a product analyst at Tasktop, and you may be asking, what does Tasktop do? So at Tasktop, our mission is to connect your tools, your people, and your value stream. And ultimately, we really want to eliminate those pesky communication barriers that you experience working with different teams and different tools. And the way that we do that is by flowing information between those distinct purpose-driven tools. So we're going to talk a little bit about value stream integration and how that all works later in the presentation. But first, let's return to some of those challenges that Brian mentioned in his presentation. And I think that those top 5 challenges really all come back to the core issue of communication barriers between teams and between different tools. So first, we talked a bit about scope changes and how we can effectively communicate scope changes to contributors who may be using those different tools. Second, the issue of impossible deadlines. So how can we work efficiently to provide continuous flows of value to customers while meeting these difficult deadlines? And in what ways can we enhance continuous communication to do so? Third, we talked a bit about poor communication, and I think I've explained a bit about how that can cause issues for project management. So while teams are siloed in their own purpose-built tools, how can we overcome those barriers to achieve continuous communication and hopefully be able to eliminate the dreaded status call or holding yet another meeting, which I know is a big problem in my former role as a project manager. Fourth, the lack of accountability. So how can we move from assigning tasks to an environment where teams eagerly pull tasks and own their own commitments to deliver on sprint plans? And finally, poor risk management. How can we confront the risks early and continuously with program-level Agile teams dedicated to finding and clearing obstacles to success? So what do these 5 challenges have in common? So as I think I'd alluded to, at their core, I think is a problem of fragmented communication. So they're really all caused by this broken, fragmented value stream. And the fragmented value stream essentially refers to this broken chain between these separate purpose-driven tools that each team is using. Each team is operating in their own purpose-built tool, and there's no easy way to communicate between them. And the annual cost of a fragmented tool chain is significant. So think about whether this experience sounds familiar to you. As a project manager, I would spend countless days and even weeks waiting on IT to grant me access to the multiple tools I needed to use to communicate with each contributor on my team. I also spent hours learning how to use each tool and how to respect each team's policies and practices within that tool. And on top of that, once I gained access to the tools, I had to do double entry in multiple tools, as well as rely on status calls and hounding people via email to get the information that I needed to succeed as a project manager. To put it simply, these communication barriers are extremely costly. So as Brian showed us, Agile program management can help significantly in confronting these challenges. But I think there's one key missing ingredient. And that key missing ingredient is value stream integration. Value stream integration allows you to connect the separate activities occurring in different tools into one united value stream by connecting those tools into a modular tool chain. So wouldn't it be great if you could automatically flow information from your tool of choice, maybe something like Microsoft Project Server, to the tool that your team members are already using? Maybe something that your developers are using like Jira. You'd no longer have to do double entry in both systems. You wouldn't have to wait on IT to grant you a password to yet another tool. And you wouldn't have to join yet another training to learn how to use that tool. So at its core, value stream integration connects your teams from a fragmented team into one happy, united team. So let's take a look again at that fragmented value stream. As a project manager, you may be using a PPM tool like Microsoft Project Server or HPE PPM. Meanwhile, your business analyst might be using a requirements management tool like JAMA or Blueprint. Your developers might be using a tool like Jira or CA Agile to track their user stories and tasks. Furthermore, your testers might be using yet another tool like Tricentis Tosca to do QA, and your operations team may be using a ticketing system like ServiceNow. I'm exhausted just thinking about the number of tools that one organization may be using. And as a project manager, you really need a way to be able to access the information from within each of these separate tools, and conversely, to flow information to team members in their own tools to communicate changes in scope or changes in priority or timeline. When the tools are fragmented, you need to rely on double entry, access barriers, and inefficient communication methods like status calls or emails to communicate these ideas or changes. And this then leads to delays, which then leads to unhappy customers. And as the project manager, you're really the one who suffers the most when the customer is unhappy. So now, let's imagine a world with value stream integration, where each of these purpose-driven tools are connected to one another, and information is able to flow seamlessly between them. When you change a deadline or the owner of a task or add details on a change in scope that perhaps a customer has asked for in one of your status calls, you're then able to flow that information seamlessly to your business analyst, which they can look at in the requirements management tool of their choice. They're then able to update the requirements for that deliverable and send those details over to your developers in the tool that they're using, so maybe something like Jira. And once your developers complete work on that feature, they can flow that information over to the QA tool that your testers are using. The information can flow seamlessly so that teams can get the information they need when they need it in a way that is consumable for them. And if you'd like, you can even take all of that information and flow it into a central database and run analytics to identify bottlenecks and high-level patterns that may be impacting delivery for your customers. So I think at its core, it's really all about information, being able to access the information you need while continuing to use the tools that are built best for your team. So here we're showing some of the many tools which you may be using at your organization. And I'd like you to imagine being able to flow information seamlessly from each of these tools to one another and how that may make your life as a project manager a little bit easier. So as I said earlier, the business case for value stream integration is significant when you can reduce time spent on double entry, bottlenecks caused by waiting on IT to grant access to separate tools, costs for additional licenses to these separate tools, as well as the enhanced visibility and continuous communication, the costs are significant, the cost savings. So those challenges that Brian addressed are now solved. So scope changes are now an opportunity to delight your customers by enabling the project manager to communicate those changes in scopes to team members, regardless of the tool that those team members are using. So you'll see value stream integration makes you flexible. Impossible deadlines. Again, that seamless flow of information will allow you to reduce bottlenecks and communicate efficiently, allowing you to meet those deadlines. So value stream integration will make you more efficient. Core communication. I think that's the core of what we've been talking about today. So being able to flow that information from one tool to the next will make your communication much more effective and continuous. So status calls and emails can be a thing of the past, which I'm sure your teams will be thanking you for. So value stream integration will make you responsive. Lack of accountability. Brian talked about how Agile program management enables teams to eagerly pull tasks as part of their existing daily stand-up process. I want to share a quick example of something that we use within our own workflow here at Tasktop to illustrate this idea. So at Tasktop, when a customer requests a new feature for our product, one of the first steps that happens is someone on our sales or services team will open a request in Salesforce, which is the tool that those teams use. That request will flow over to our business analyst in Target Process, which is the requirements management tool that our business analysts use. And their next step is to confirm with our software developers whether that request is technically feasible. To do that, they check a box on the requirement in Target Process, which will automatically flow it over to Jira. Those developers can then pull those tasks in as part of their existing daily triaging calls and assign them so that there are owners who are accountable for researching whether that feature is technically feasible or not. So by utilizing these existing processes that the teams are already taking part in, we're able to utilize continuous communication in order to hold teams accountable and deliver results for our customers. So value stream integration will make your teams accountable. And finally, poor risk management. So by flowing information seamlessly between tools, you'll be able to confront risks early and continuously, enabling your teams to find and clear obstacles to success. You'll no longer need to wait for a weekly status call or for team members to wade through the hundreds of emails that they receive each day, which I know I got complaints about that as a project manager. They'll be able to get the information they need when they need it and within their tool of choice. So you'll see that value stream integration will make you and your team successful. So I want to close just by underscoring that a value stream approach really is crucial to success as a project manager. There is no one single tool platform that provides a silver bullet. Each of your teams will need to continue to use the tools that make sense for their own team's goals and needs. However, by flowing information between these purpose-built tools, we can allow for continuous communication and collaboration that will deliver the results that your customers need. So with that, I think I'd like to close out and just hand it over to Ben to open it up for any questions that you guys have.
Terrific. So I'm going to ask you a quick question first. This comes from Gabriel, and then we'll go into the general Q&A. We have quite a handful of questions. So Gabriel asks, what type of information can you flow between different tools?
Yeah, that's a great question. So using Tasktop, you can flow most of the core work items in any tool that we support. So those would include things like defects, epics, user stories, requests. And then within those work items, you also have the flexibility to decide which fields you would like to flow, as well as whether you'd like to flow comments or attachments. So there's a lot of flexibility in determining which components and which pieces of information you'd like to flow from one tool to the other.
Terrific. So Bill has a question for Brian, and this, I think his question is, how does Agile program management relate to scaled Agile? A lot of what you're talking about the program level, and I have thoughts around enterprise.
That's a great question, Bill. The Agile program management is kind of a generic term, but it's certainly one of the frameworks that can be used to implement Agile program management is scaled Agile. In fact, I would say it's probably one of the most popular frameworks that's out there. I know there's been some recent research in that area that has kind of put scaled Agile into that category. So it's a great question. It's Agile program management is more the generic term. SAFe, the Scaled Agile framework, is I would say the leading framework for implementing Agile program management. I hope that answered, or at least partially answered your question.
Patricia, this is another one for you, Brian. Patricia has asked, what preparation should I take in advance of a program release planning meeting, and how long is this meeting typically?
That's a very good question. The preparation, one of the key elements of preparation is getting there's really two steps or two parts. One is getting the program level backlog prioritized. In other words, in effect, just the way a product owner prioritizes the team backlog, you want a program level product owner or program manager to prioritize the program backlog with epics, typically, maybe some user stories. And the second major prep item, other than the logistical steps, would be to basically identify your vision for the upcoming increment that you want to create. So in other words, there's a vision around what is it that you want to come out of the next 10 to 13 weeks with in terms of overall program functionality. So good question.
This is one more for you. Bala asks, if there are teams, for example, marketing and sales, that don't follow Agile, but are critical stakeholders in programs, then how can we leverage Agile program management?
That's an important question. it's interesting. The marketing and sales group in that example, I mean, that could just be representative. But effectively, that group is in all probability looking for certain capabilities, and they have certain programs that they may be sponsoring. So, for example, if you take something like a CRM system that may be sponsored by the chief marketing officer in order to better manage customer relationships, there's nothing. They may not follow an agile process to do a lot of their other work, but it should be possible to convince them to for this particular program to utilize an agile approach. And so I guess my suggestion would be to explain the benefits to utilizing agile program management in terms of actually being able to deliver working software on an aggressive timeline, and see if they might be willing to to participate, and probably by contributing, say, a product owner or product owners to support the overall development effort. Anyway, I hope that helps. Depending on the details, that could be a much trickier challenge than what I just represented, but I'd say it's worth attempting to convince them.
Sure. So this is a tools-related question for Rebecca. Mark asks, what happens if the software tool my team is using isn't on your list? Am I just out of luck, or are there other options to flow data from that tool?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are a few options if we don't currently offer a connector to the tool that your team's using. So first, we release new connectors quarterly. So there should be new ones coming out periodically, and hopefully that will cover one of the tools that you're looking for. We also have what we call gateway add-ons to the Tasktop Integration Hub, and that'll enable you to connect to a wide range of tools, such as DevOps tools, by sending a JSON payload, which will then be flowed to other tools like Jira or HPALM to send that information over to them. So there is some flexibility there as well.
So this, I think, is going to be for the both of you guys, but Rebecca, if you could start first. Jesse asks, you talk about visibility, the importance of visibility across the value stream. Could you talk more about the kinds of visibility we should be expecting? So maybe, Rebecca, you could talk about it from the tooling side, and Brian, maybe from the process side.
Yeah, definitely. So from the tooling side, I think our database option is a really good place to get high-level visibility across the value stream. So we have an enterprise reporting add-on for Tasktop Integration Hub, which lets you flow information from separate tools into one centralized database. And then you'll be able to use that information from that database to identify, are there certain places where it's taking a really long time for the status of these tasks to change? Are there these consistent backlog or bottlenecks that we're seeing that our teams really could find a way to be more efficient? So I think that's one really great option to get this high-level visibility to assess where things could be improved.
Brian, what's your thought on that?
Yeah, I tend to think of the importance of visibility with Agile program management as being related to providing the individual Agile teams visibility into what the senior program leaders are trying to accomplish with the product. So you can think of it as the program roadmap, for example, but it's remarkable sometimes how often you see Agile teams operating in isolation and not really being brought into these overall program planning efforts that we're talking about with Agile program management. And that's missing a lot of the potential power of Agile when you don't have these program management events to let the teams plan together, because you get some really unique insights into into the long-term roadmap for the product when you engage the whole group.
And I've got a quick
provide the whole
follow-up.
group.
I've got a quick follow-up as it relates to value streams. This is from Ken. Can you just provide some comments on how the adoption of this process is handled or accepted within an organization? Do you have any best practices there?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it's definitely valuable to do some enabling internally when you put forth this new process. A lot of the time we'll have people will set up integrations that'll filter specific artifacts so that only certain ones will flow over to the other system. So I think it's definitely great to enable the group to understand exactly when things will flow over and why, so they know how to make educated decisions about which fields they're updating and who's going to be able to access that information. But we've definitely seen really, really positive changes with the adoption of value stream integration. And as Brian was saying, being able to get the teams, the Agile team, integrated throughout the process and to enable them to have the information that they need to succeed at their job, instead of feeling as if you're siloed within this one tool and not able to access the information outside of it, I think has had really significant impacts on team engagement and team success.
Perfect. Brian, you have anything you want to add?
Oh, no, I think Rebecca, you did a great job with that one. I tend to agree with everything she said.
Cool. So this is going to be the last question, and this comes from Jay. I think we'll ask this to the both of you. How do you address the common challenge of individuals who have a knowledge of Agile and Scrum, but not necessarily a know-how? Rebecca, you want to go first?
Sure, yeah. I think that's a great question. I can share a quick anecdote, actually. So when I started at Tasktop, I came from an organization where my specific role did not engage with Agile processes too much directly. And when I started my role, my manager actually had me read a book about Agile so that I could learn kind of the foundational ideas of it. And I think starting everyone on the team with that level playing field of having us all read those same materials and engage with the ideas to learn about what the foundation was super helpful to get everyone on the same page and thinking about those ideas and how we could use them to leverage our teams and be more successful. Brian, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think this almost sounds, Ben, like something, a question that we'd be looking we'd be looking for, almost like we had asked it, because there's a a big role that cPrime plays, of course, in Agile implementations, is providing coaches and support to help translate knowledge that might be provided through training into into practical application, particularly when you're going through a critical project. So I think whether you hire a coach from cPrime, or whether you bring on a coach as an employee or coaches as employees, I think having folks that with deep experience with Agile, so that you can help people that are coming from a knowledge place where they've gotten some training, they've gotten some initial knowledge, and actually get them to a point where they have real experience and they can really execute on their individual roles as Scrum Masters, product owners, or or team members.
Terrific. So I'm going to just close out in less than 30 seconds, and then we'll let everybody go. I just wanted to thank Brian and Rebecca for your time and knowledge, and to everybody for joining us today. We will be supplying the recording and slides to everybody tomorrow, and we'd really appreciate it if you would please fill out the survey and give us some feedback on today's session. Again, thanks so much for being with us today. We hope to see you on a future webinar, and enjoy the rest of your week. Take care.